أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يوصي نعمه العادون ولا يودي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بهد الهمم ولا يناله غوث الفتن الذي ليس لصفاته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت محدود ولا أجل ممدود فترى الخلائق بقدرته ونشر الرياح برحمته ووتد بالسخر ما يدعى عرض ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وحبيبنا وحبيب رب العالمين بالقاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعن على أعدائهم أجمعين من أول يوم ظلمهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المبين وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن المتقين في جنات وعيون صدق الله العلي العظيم. Brothers and sisters, before we get started on tonight's lecture, please recite our Surah Fatiha for the marhumeen of the sponsors of tonight's lecture. Please recite our Surah Fatiha for the marhumeen of Mushtaq Zaidi and Ashfaq Zaidi. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. These last few days, I said yesterday that we were going to focus on the spiritual aspect or the fiqhi aspect of the religion, because the whole about 20 days, 20, 21, 22 days of the whole month of Ramadan, we spent basically on the aqaid portion of the religion, or specifically on the nabuwat portion of our aqaid. So these last 5-6 days, or this last week inshallah, let's look at topics that deal with the furu'ud-din now, because we spent so much time on the usul-ad-din. But as we're all aware, we know that Islam is based upon two aspects, and those two aspects are aqidah and amal. And like I said, the whole first part of Ramadan we spent on aqidah. Now let's look at the amal aspect of this religion. Aqidah without amal is useless, just as amal without aqidah is useless. Being a Muslim, it doesn't just mean that we merely carry out these ritual worship acts that we do, nor that we only carry the belief of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah and stop at that. Meaning that being a Muslim doesn't mean that we just carry out those ritual acts. For example, prayer. For example, in this month of Ramadan, carry out the ritual act of fasting. It doesn't mean that we just carry it out because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us to, in the sense that yes, we obey the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we need to get past that. We do it because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered us to, but we are supposed to look at what benefit is there for us. Are we doing it for just a benefit to ourselves, just a bodily benefit, or no, are we doing it for a spiritual benefit? Because this fasting, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered this for all the Muslims to fast. Why? Yes, it has bodily benefits to it, but is that the reason we're doing it? Because if that's the reason we're doing it, then the benefit that Allah, this bodily benefit, if that was our intention in the beginning of Ramadan, if that's our intention throughout the whole month of Ramadan, that we're only going to get just this bodily benefit of losing weight, staying healthy, or whatever. If that was our intention, then that's it. We achieved our goal in this month of Ramadan, if we did. And I know a lot of people, they fast throughout the whole day and then they stuff themselves when it comes time for iftar. But if they have a little restraint and their intention from the beginning was, I just want to lose weight, then that was your intention. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you what you wanted. No, but if your intention was more than that, if your intention was for your akhirah, if your intention was a spiritual aspect of fasting, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward you with that also. But this religion is a whole way of life. And we see that everything is linked together, from the wajibat to the muharramat. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us to pray, He also tells us to be obedient to parents. If He tells us to fast, He also tells us to give charity also. And as one makes themselves better by doing these acts, they also make the society a better place. Meaning that within Islam, there are acts that are just beneficial for me as a person, as an individual. But there are some acts that are not just beneficial for me, no. They're acts that are beneficial for the whole of society. For example, charity. Charity is beneficial for me from the spiritual sense because I'm getting reward for it. But that benefits society, that's a benefit to society that we can see ourselves when we give charity. And there are other acts like this also. We call ourselves the Shias of the Ahlul Bayt, but are we truly their Shias or just people that have love for the Ahlul Bayt? One night, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, he was walking when he saw a couple of young gentlemen that were walking at night, and they were coming towards him. And after greeting each other, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he asked them who they are, and they reply, Ya Ali, we are your Shias. Ya Ali, we're your Shias. Amir al-Mu'mineen looks at them and he says that you're a Shia? You don't have any signs of a Shia. Just say that you are one of my supporters. That's it. You are one of those people that has love for me. That's it. Imam Muhammad Baqir al-Islam, he tells Jabir ibn Abdullah Ansari that it says, Ya Jabir, is it enough for a person to claim oneself as a Shia by professing love for us Ahlul Bayt? No. I swear to God, a person is not our follower except the one who fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and obeys Him. Meaning that a Shia of the Ahlul Bayt fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and obeys Him. Meaning what? A Shia of the Ahlul Bayt has taqwa. A Shia of the Ahlul Bayt is a muttaqi. And the Imam, he goes on to say, Oh Jabir, our followers are not recognized except through humility, submission, honesty, praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala abundantly, fasting and prayers, devotion, attending to the poor, the needy, the debtors and orphans who live near them. Saying the truth, reciting the Quran, withholding the tongue from the people except for good things to say, being trustworthy for relatives in any affair. Imam, he goes on to say that these are the characteristics of a Shia. These are the characteristics of a person who is truly our Shia. If we don't see these characteristics within ourselves, then no, we have no right to call ourselves the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt. Why? Because if we're truly the Shias, the Ahlul Bayt are the ones who are going to decide if we truly are their Shias or not. If we're not, then we have no right to call ourselves the Shias of the Ahlul Bayt. In Islam, all of the wajib acts that we perform have a philosophy behind them. But at the same time, they're all linked together, similar to a chain. There are some people who don't understand that all of these wajibat, they make a link in this chain that leads to salvation, that leads to Jannah. Islam teaches us that salvation will be attained by those who have faith and that they practice that faith. And as we're all aware, the companions who were the closest to the Masumeen, when we look at their lives, when we look at each one of them, we see that in terms of character and in terms of their morals, these companions of the Ahlul Bayt, they were the closest to the Imams. And because of these two traits, we see that they are the lights that lead to the holy Masumeen. For example, how many people of Kufa were there that wrote letters to Imam Hussein alayhi salam? How many people? There's narrations that say at the very least 17,000 people. 17,000 people wrote letters to Imam Hussein. The other narrations up to 30,000 people. They wrote letters to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And how many people were there at the Battle of Karbala? 72. That's it. Where were all these? Where was everyone? Where were at the very least 17,000 people that wrote letters to Imam Hussein alayhi salam? And we read in Shaykh Abbas Qumi's book Nafasul Mahmoud that in Imam Hussein alayhi salam's last attack against the enemy, and Amir al-Mu'min did this too, whoever came in front of the Imam, he didn't just kill anyone that came in front of him. No. Imam Hussein alayhi salam's scribe in Karbala, he says that I saw Imam Hussein alayhi salam, I saw my master, he was killing some people and letting others go. So I asked him, oh my master, I see that you're killing some people that are coming in front of you and letting others go. Why is that? The Imam, he tells him the same thing that Imam Ali he told Malik Ashtar in the Battle of Siffin, which was that Malik, I look at their progeny and then I strike them. If I see that in this person's future generations there will be a mu'min born from him, I let him live just for the sake of that mu'min. For the sake of that mu'min. There is a reason, brothers and sisters, Imam Hussein had said that neither did my grandfather have companions like mine, neither did my father, nor did my brother have companions like mine. Why was that? Because of their character, because of their morals. It was through their morals that they recognized their Imam and what right he held over them. It is a known fact that this human being is the most complicated and one of the most astonishing creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the problem is, this creature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this human being, in its struggle with nature to improve quality of life, man has forgotten the most precious reality, which is the self, which is the soul. And it is because of this self, it is because of this soul that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala trusted mankind with khilafat. Tazkiyatul nafs, or purification of the soul, is not an easy task, as many people might be aware. This is why, according to the Holy Prophet, purification of the soul is known as Jihad al-Akbar, or the greater jihad. This purification of the soul is actually a fight between yourself and shaitan, who is always trying to take you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you look at Islamic history, and specifically Shia history, what will you find? You will find that the ones that impacted Islam positively were the ones that fought the great jihad, or the ones that fought the greater jihad. And they were victorious in that fight. Other than the 14 infallibles, if you leave aside the 14 infallibles, we have people like Salman Farsi, we have people like Abu Zar Ghafari, we have people like Umayl ibn Ziyad. Or you just look at the events of Karbala. The event of Karbala is the greatest example of the purification of the souls. You had 72 people on one side, and you had 30,000 people on the other side. How and why were those 72 people able to stand up to the Pharaoh of their time and succeed? What had they done to achieve such a victory? It is because they had purified their souls beforehand and succeeded. It was because those 72 were muttaqeen. It's our duty to be muttaqi. It's our duty to purify our souls. These 3 months of Rajab, Shaban, Ramadan, these 3 months are specifically so we can purify our souls, even though it's supposed to be done throughout the whole year. But because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given more blessings for the actions that we do in these 3 months than He has in the previous months, and from within these 3 months, the month of Ramadan, every good action that we do, every good act that we do, we see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us more reward for that same good act in the month of Ramadan compared to if we were to do it outside the month of Ramadan. What does this tell you? It tells you that this month of Ramadan is the perfect time to start Tazkiyatul Nafs, this purification of the soul. Because without purifying our soul, we will never be able to have that communion with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the way people of the past had. If you want to be Salman Farsi, if you want to be Abu Zar Ghafari, if you want to be these companions, or you want to be, for example, Kumail ibn Ziyad, one of the most devout companions of Amir al-Mu'minin Islam, then it becomes necessary that you and I, we do tazkiyat al-nafs, we purify our souls. And why is this important? Why is it important for us to purify our souls? Why is it important for us to have taqwa? Why is it important for us to be muttaqeen? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in Surah Al-Hijr, verse number 45, إِنَّ الْمُتَّقِينَ فِي جَنَّاتٍ وَعُيُونٍ. And this is the verse that I started this lecture off with. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that the muttaqeen, the God-fearing, will be amid gardens and fountains. And then we read in Surah Al-Hud, verse number 49, إِنَّ الْعَاقِبَةَ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. Surely the end is for the God-fearing, the end is for the muttaqeen. And then we read in Surah Al-Maryam, verse number 72, ثُمَّ نُنَجِّيَ الَّذِينَ اتَّقُوا. And we will deliver those who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We will deliver those who have taqwa. We see that the end is for those who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The deliverance is for those who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The gardens are for those who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what is taqwa, and how do you and I become muttaqeen? How do you and I become muttaqeen? Taqwa in the Taqwa is the Islamic concept of having self-restraint. Self-restraint. It is used over 251 times in the Holy Quran as either a noun or a verb. And the term taqwa, it comes from the Arabic root waqaya, which means protection or support. A lot of people, they translate it to mean fear. Fear of God, fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But taqwa is not meant to mean fear or avoidance, but because having fear is a prerequisite to protecting oneself from something and to avoid it, it may sometimes refer to having fear. Meaning, when we fear, if we fear something, how do we protect ourselves from that thing? We try to avoid it. We avoid it. So those people that practice self-control by refraining from acting upon desires that take away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are called muttaqeen. And muttaqeen is the term for those people that practice taqwa, or those people that have taqwa. But in his Mufradat al-Quran, Raghib Isfahani, he says that the meaning of the word waqaya, the root of taqwa, the meaning of the word waqaya, is to protect something against everything which may damage it. Protect something against everything which may damage it. And taqwa means to put the soul under protection against whatever threatens it. That's what taqwa truly means. Putting the soul under protection from anything that can damage it, from anything that threatens it. It's important to note that taqwa is not about performing religious obligations such as praying and fasting. It's about living a pious life. Praying is part of this Islamic life. It's not the whole Islamic life. Fasting is part of this Islamic life. It's not the whole of Islamic life. No. It doesn't mean that if you're just a prayer, if you're an abid, you have taqwa. No. You might be an abid, but to say that you have taqwa, no. Taqwa requires that your whole existence or your whole Islamic life, you've refrained from those things that will damage this soul. A person who possesses taqwa, a person possessing taqwa, abandons living an animalistic life and chooses to live a moral life. Meaning what? Meaning that just because you pray, you're praying on one hand, and on the other hand you're cheating. You're praying on one hand, on the other hand you're lying. You're fasting here, but over there you're doing ribat. You're backbiting. Does this mean that you have taqwa? You're praying? No, this doesn't mean you have taqwa. Taqwa, like I said, it means encompassing. Taqwa encompasses your whole life, every aspect of your life. So taqwa, it encompasses all facets of life. And there's taqwa in religion, there's taqwa in usuluddin, there's taqwa in faruddin, and there's taqwa in business. There's taqwa in your personal life, there's taqwa in your social life. When one practices taqwa in all aspects of their life, then they can be recognized as a muttaqeen. All aspects of life, not just one aspect of life. We know what it means to have taqwa in the religious aspect of life. We all know. But how do we become muttaqeen in the social aspect? We know how to be muttaqeen in our relation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But how do we become muttaqeen in our interactions with other people? If piety is observed in the social relation, the world would turn into a paradise itself if piety was observed in society. For every person suffering backwardness, misfortune, wretchedness are the result of not observing piety. We barely even observe taqwa between family members, let alone observe it with others outside of the family. Taqwa in relation to parents, taqwa in relation to kids, taqwa in relation to other relatives. Having taqwa in terms of parents, Imam Muhammad Baqir Islam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, he's been reported to have said that among Banu Israel there was an ascetic who went by the name of Juray, and he lived in a monastery. One day his mother, she came to him and he was engaged in prayers, he was busy praying. And the mother called him, and Juray, he ignored her. Called him again, he ignored her. Called him again, he ignored her. Returning from the monastery, the mother, she said, I asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I asked Allah, the God of the children of Israel, to disgrace you. The mother, she got mad at her son. And before going home, as soon as she left from the monastery, she praised to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She said, I asked the God of Banu Israel to disgrace you. And the following day, what happened? A prostitute, Imam says that a prostitute went to the monastery and she was in labor, claiming that the child, it belonged to Juray. Soon the story spread among Banu Israel. People said the one who blamed us for adultery has committed adultery himself. And at that time, the king, he ordered Juray to be hanged. Juray's mother, she went to him while beating on her head. She was crying. And Juray said to his mother, you're the one who did this to me. You're the one who cursed me. When the people surrounded him, he said, what do I have to do with adultery? The people who heard this said, oh Juray, how can you prove that you're innocent? And Juray, he said, bring me the child. The child was brought, and Juray said, who is your father? He asked the child, who is your father? And the child said, so and so. So and so shepherd from so and so tribe, that's the father. From that day, Juray, he took an oath that he would serve his mother and never leave her side. Taqwa in relation to parents. Having taqwa in relation to kids. Imam Ali Islam, he said that a child's rights on the father is that the father should choose a good name for him, provide him with good education, and teach him the Quran. These are the rights that a child has. Taqwa in relation to children. Taqwa in relation to business. And one of the most recommended acts according to the Holy Masumeen is that a Muslim have their own business and engage in trade. That's why you see that certain communities within the Shia branch of Islam engage in trade and business and are known as businessmen. And you see that those communities are so prosperous. Do you know why? It's because Imam Sadiq al-Islam has reported from Imam Ali al-Islam as saying that to one of his companions, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, he told one of his companions to engage in trade, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you blessings. For I heard the Holy Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam say that sustenance has 10 parts, 9 of which are in trade and 1 part is in other things. Meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He's split up sustenance into 10 parts. 9 of those parts are in trade. 9 of those parts are in business. 1 of those parts is in everything else. 1 of those parts in everything else. And you have to remember that even in trade and business, it must be accompanied with an understanding of the Islamic laws and regulations. This is taqwa in relation to business. Asbagh ibn Nabata, he reports that I heard Amir al-Mu'mineen saying from the pulpit that all group of tradesmen, all group of business people, first you should learn and know the rules of lawful and unlawful trade, and then engage in trade. And then engage in trade. Over here, the only thing that the people look after when they want to start a business or do a business is this business. They don't stop and think, hold on a second, is this halal or haram? No, this business is bringing in a lot of money, I'm going to do it. No, this isn't what Shia Islam says. This isn't what Islam says. There is haram, there is halal. Even in business, Imam Ali Islam, he says, know what the rules and the regulations of business are before you start your business. In addition to knowing the rules of trade, a Muslim, they must not act according, a Muslim should act according to their own duty and safeguard the dignity and honor of Muslims in Islam. They should not do anything that will harm the religion of Islam. Not do anything that will mock us in terms of trade. In terms of all aspects of our life, we shouldn't do anything that will harm the religion. Make a mockery just out of ourselves, and not just out of ourselves, but the religion that we practice too. A businessman, a tradesman should be a model for Islam, not a source of dishonor. He should observe what is recommended in business or trade. He should practice what is lawful and avoid what is unlawful. For example, monopolizing, underweight selling, interest. These are all haram. Imam al-Baqir, he quotes from Amir al-Mu'mineen that he says that Amir al-Mu'mineen, he used to walk in the marketplace with a whip in his hand. And he stopped by in a place and said, O group of tradesmen, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he would remind them of what was related to trade, about interest and what Islam says about it. Selling underweight, what Islam says about that. Taking false oath, what Islam says about that. Fairness, what Islam says about that. Meaning what? Meaning that made in China part or component, that made in China part that you have or we have that we're trying to sell, we can't stick a label on it that says made in Japan or made in the USA and sell it. No, this is cheating, this is lying. Wherever it's made, just have a sticker saying that it's made from there if it requires a sticker. Here in the US, that's done a lot of the time, that's done a lot. It might be made in China, but it's got a made in USA logo, it's got a made in USA sticker. This within Islam itself is illegal. And this is what it means to have taqwa, fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of business. One may have this impression that the only duty of man is to take care of himself when it comes to taqwa in terms of our life. Maybe there might be someone who has this interpretation or this idea that the only duty that someone has is to take care of himself, take care of his wife, take care of his children and his relatives, that's it. And that he has no responsibility or she has no responsibility towards other people. And that, brothers and sisters, is not true within Islam. Although the duties towards themselves, the duties towards the wife, the duties towards the children, the duties towards the family, and the duties towards the relatives are more serious, still their responsibilities that others also have. There are also duties that this person, this individual has on others. No human being can ignore his fellow human beings or be indifferent to them. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he's reported that the Messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says that whoever spends a day without doing anything for the fellow Muslims is not considered to be a Muslim. Whoever spends one day without doing anything for the fellow Muslims is not considered to be a Muslim. And Imam Ali he's reported to have said that there are 30 rights that every Muslim has to observe towards his Muslim brother. 30 rights that every Muslim has to observe towards his Muslim brother. This is what? This is taqwa in relation to others. This is taqwa in relation to society. How many of us practice this type of taqwa? One, what are some of these rights? One, Imam Ali says to look or to overlook the Muslim brother's mistakes. Two, to have pity on him when he is distressed. When he needs help, help him. Three, to cover their faults. Four, to forgive their lapses. Five, to accept the excuses that they give. Six, to reject their backbiting. If someone is backbiting to you about someone else, you reject it. Seven, a right that another Muslim has or a Muslim has over another Muslim is that they keep advising him. They keep advising. 8, to observe his friendship. 9, to thank him for any favor that was done. 10, to help him. 11, to grant whatever request, if it's possible, the requests that they have, if you're able to grant them, to grant those requests. And 12, to intervene on their behalf if they need some sort of intervention. How many of us practice this type of taqwa with other mu'mineen? Overlooking their mistakes? No. One little mistake and that's it. That mistake will never be forgotten. Or not that it will just never be forgotten, but constantly, over and over, people will remind you of the mistake that you made. To cover their faults? No. Remember when you did that? Or going to someone else and telling them that, oh, this person's like this, backbiting. How many of us do that? Imam Ali, he himself, he says to associate with people in a way that if you die, they will weep for you, and if you live, they are eager to see you. That's the way Imam Ali says you should live your life. If we were to just give the people these 12 or 13 out of the 30, if we were to give just the people just these 12 or 13 rights, they would naturally long to see us when we are alive and weep for us after we pass away. If we were to just give them these, if you were to just give them half of these rights that Imam Ali talks about. But you can't be muttaqeen, or you can't have taqwa in relation to everyone else unless and until you observe all 30 of those rights. It's because we don't give each other these rights, it is because we don't practice social taqwa, animosities are harbored within families, within friendships, within communities and societies. We read in Surah Al-Baqarah verse number 2, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. This is the book, and it is guidance for sure, without doubt, to those who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This book, this guidance that is in this book is for whom? It's a guidance for the muttaqeen. And then again in verse number 183, what do we read? O you who believe, fasting is prescribed to you as it was prescribed to those before you, that you may fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you could have taqwa. This month of Ramadan that we're fasting. We're fasting in this whole month of Ramadan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that this month of Ramadan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ordered in this month of Ramadan fasting. Why? So that we could have taqwa. How many of us have actually fasted knowing that Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, he tells us that these body parts, they have rights. How many of us fasted while giving these body parts their due rights? Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam, when you look at his treatise of rights, he says too that these body parts have rights. Why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala want, or why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say that He has prescribed fasting so that we could have taqwa, if this body part or these body parts do not have rights? When we observe the rights of these body parts in the month of Ramadan, then we would have taqwa. Or else what taqwa would there be in just not eating and drinking? What taqwa? People that want to do diets, they do the same thing. They don't eat, they won't drink 12 hours, 14 hours, 18 hours, whatever the case is. I don't know what the new fad is now, whatever it might be. But what would be the difference between a diet and this fasting if this body did not have any rights on itself? This is the difference, and this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means that He wanted, or He prescribed fasting so that we would have taqwa. Why? Because everything now, it has rights, and it becomes necessary for us to observe the rights of these body parts. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in Surah Al-Dukhan, verse number 51, Innal muttaqina fi maqamil, the God-fearing, the muttaqeen will be in secure places. And in Surah Al-Shura, verse number 90, and the garden shall be brought near for those who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And all of these ayats and the ones that I recited before too of the Quran and many more, the word taqwa and its derivatives have been translated into fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if a non-Muslim was to read the Quran and see all the places where it says to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would no doubt ask, what kind of God is this? He continually wants me to fear Him, so that you fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that you may have fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If a non-Muslim was to read it, they'd is this some scary being that is unjust that I need to continue that He wants me to fear Him? It's necessary to understand, brothers and sisters, that it is not expected for one to harbor negative thoughts about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when fearing Him. God is not meant to be viewed as a dreadful and a frightening entity, no. Rather, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is absolute perfection and the best source for a human being to love. The concept of human beings having to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually refers to what? Fearing divine justice. Fearing divine justice. You have to remember that justice has two sides to it. Justice isn't just one-sided. Justice has two sides to it. There is a reward side, or a reward aspect of justice, and then there's the punishment aspect of justice. When it is said to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's meant to fear His punishment. When we fear His punishment, we refrain from sinning or breaking His divine laws. And you see that we do that in our daily lives. We do that every day in our lives, here in this world. For example, when we refrain from breaking a law, why do we do it? If there is a speed limit that says 60 miles an hour, we won't go 70, we won't go 80, we won't go 90. Why? Because we're afraid of what will happen if we get caught. We're afraid of what will happen when we do get caught. We're afraid of getting punished by the government. That fear of punishment prevents us from breaking the laws. And that's exactly the same case, or that's what's supposed to be the same case with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fearing the punishment aspect of His divine justice. On the other side, the flip side of that is His mercy also, or His reward. Taqwa is a prerequisite for a person who wants to live his life by certain principles, and this person is to have a clear direction in order to move towards a specific goal. And in doing so, he or she is to protect himself against desires inconsistent with those set goals, those set principles. And in religious context, taqwa is the quality of those who protect themselves from all that is considered by religion as wrong and sinful from a religious aspect. And there are two types of taqwa. The first is just to avoid facing the situation. If you avoid facing that situation, then you will be safe. Meaning to avoid facing that situation in which sins may take place. And the second is to face those challenges that you're in, and to remain persistent and to remain conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about what He wants us to do, what He doesn't want us to do. And according to the first type, a person protects himself from sins by refraining from a situation that leads to committing a sin. And this is similar to a person who avoids an infested environment to protect their health, meaning that they know that this place has this certain disease. This certain disease is rampant in this area of the world. Okay, if that's the case, then I'm not going to vacation there. I'm not going to go to vacation there. I'm not going to go to vacation there. So what does this person do? By not going there, they're protecting themselves from that disease that is spread in that part of the world. But the second type of taqwa, a person, what do? They create a state and power in their soul that gives them spiritual and moral security. That is, that if he does find himself in a situation where the means and causes of sin are all around him, that spiritual state protects him and prevents him from committing sins. Constantly aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this, for example, is similar to a person who creates immunity in his body so that the microbes of the diseases have no effect on that health, or have no effect on his health. And the general public considers taqwa to be the first type, meaning you just refrain. You don't even go. For those who are said to have taqwa, it usually means that he is a cautious man who secludes himself in an isolated area and refrains from those things that cause sins. Meaning that some people, they have the idea, or they have this mentality that if you're a muttaqin, is a hermit who's out in the mountains, in a cave somewhere, secluded from all of society, and they're just worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's absolutely true. You can have taqwa like that. No one's denying that. No one's denying that. But one form of taqwa is stronger than the other form. From these two forms of taqwa, where you've basically secluded yourself from all of sins so you won't commit them, or you've secluded yourself from all of society so you won't commit any sins, or this is one form of taqwa. Or the second form is, no, you're within the society, yet you refrain from committing sins. And the ulama, they say that this second form of taqwa is stronger. Why? Because that first form of taqwa, there are no sins to entice this person with. There are no sins. If there were, who knows what they would do. But this person who has taqwa living within the city, this person's taqwa is stronger than that person who's a hermit in the mountains. Why? Because the sins were all around this person, yet this person refrained from committing those sins. This person, even when he was surrounded by sins, he was conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was aware of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted from him. And because of that, his taqwa will be stronger. Why? Because it could happen that when that hermit comes back to society, when he joins back to society, because he had left society for so long, now when he's come back, that he might fall into those sins. Why? Because he had never seen them before. He had never seen them before. So it might be easier for him to fall into those sins. So inshallah, brothers and sisters, I will end my lecture here for tonight, and tomorrow we'll continue with another aspect of the religion. But brothers and sisters, the month of Ramadan, We should have already started in the month of Rajab, but if we didn't, then we should have started in this month of Ramadan to be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be aware of what His laws are, what His rules are, and what He wants from us. And that is the only way that we can truly achieve taqwa, to be muttaqeen. That is the only way that we can truly call ourselves the Shias of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Because the Shias of Amir al-Mu'mineen, they themselves, they're all muttaqeen. They all have taqwa. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, keep the Imam of our time safe, make his reappearance as soon as possible. Let us, our families, and anyone that wants to sacrifice their life for him and his cause be able to sacrifice their life for him and his cause. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive our sins. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive the sins of our family members, to forgive the sins of all of the marhumeen, mu'mineen, mu'minat that do not have anyone to ask for forgiveness on their behalf, to pray on their behalf. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us on this path, this straight path, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, to get us to that level where we can be the muttaqeen, of Imam al-Muttaqeen, because Amir al-Mu'mineen, one of his laqab is Imam al-Muttaqeen. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to get us to that stage where Amir al-Mu'mineen himself, he can say that this person is one of my Shias, that this person is one of the Muttaqeen. And please, brothers and sisters, once again, recite Surah Fatiha for the marhumeen of the sponsors of tonight's lecture. So please recite Surah Fatiha for the marhumeen of Mushtaq Zaidi and Ashfaq Zaidi. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Bismillah. Bismillah. And before I forget, please recite Surah Fatiha for all of those marhumeen whose names were on the wall at Bab al-Ilm. Please recite Surah Fatiha for all of their marhumeens also. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inshallah, brothers and sisters, I will see you all again tomorrow to continue our lectures for the last week of the month of Ramadan. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.